All right, let's dive in. Get ready to go way back in time with us today, folks. Ancient Greece. Here we come.
It's
You
exciting.
bet it is. Our listeners sent in some fascinating sources in Italian about a philosopher, a guy named Empedocles.
Empedocles, a truly remarkable thinker.
He really was. And we're going to uncover some of his most groundbreaking ideas, stuff that really shaped Western thought.
And you know what's really cool?
With that,
We'll see how these ancient ideas still resonate even today, thousands of years later.
I love that. So he lived in the 5th century BC, right? That's like way back.
Yep, 5th century BC. It was a time when, well, imagine this. People were just starting to question those old traditional myths and explanations about the universe.
So they were like, hey, wait a minute. Maybe there's more to this than just the gods controlling everything.
Precisely. And, Empedocles, he was right there in the thick of it, bridging that gap between mythology and, actual rational thought.
So before we get into his big ideas, can you paint a picture for us? What was going on in ancient Greece at that time? Like, what was the intellectual scene like?
Okay, so picture ancient Greece. It was buzzing. Thinkers everywhere, debating, challenging old ideas. They were searching for, I guess you could say, the fundamental truth of the universe.
Kind of like the first scientists, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what everything's made of.
Exactly. And there were some big names before Empedocles, like Thales. He thought everything came from water.
Water. Interesting.
Right. Then there's an Anaximander. He went for something a little more abstract, some kind of boundless primordial stuff.
Primordial stuff. Okay, getting a little heady now.
And then an Anaximenes, he was all about air.
So everyone's picking their favorite element, huh?
Yeah.
But Empedocles, he wasn't satisfied with just one.
Nope. He said, hold on, I've got a better idea. And he decided to go big and propose 4.
4. That's a lot of element.
That's Empedocles for you. He believed the universe was made of earth, air, fire, and water.
Makes sense. I mean, those are pretty fundamental, right? Earth, air, fire, water. You kind of see them everywhere.
Right. But here's the thing. He didn't just see them as, like dirt, wind, flames, and H2O. He saw them as almost like divine.
Divine, like connected to the gods.
Exactly. Remember, the Greek gods were often linked to natural forces, right? So it's like he was trying to find a way to blend those mythological beliefs with a more, let's say, scientific view of the world.
Yeah, that makes sense. He was kind of trying to have it both ways.
In a way, yes. I mean, this blending of myth and philosophy was pretty typical for pre-Socratic thinkers.
So he's got his 4 elements, but I'm guessing he didn't just stop there, did he?
Oh, not even close. Empedocles went on to describe how these elements interact, how they shape the world around us. And to do that, he brought in 2 powerful forces, like a cosmic battle almost.
Oh, sounds juicy. A cosmic battle. Tell me more.
He called them love and strife.
Love and strife. Wow, those are some intense forces.
They are. Imagine this constant push and pull. Love, it brings things together, unites the elements in harmony. Strife, it tears them apart, creates diversity and change.
So it's like a constant dance.
Yeah.
Things coming together, then separating, forming new combinations.
Perfect analogy. That's Empedocles for you. And for him, this dance wasn't just happening on a small scale, He saw it playing out on a cosmic level. It was like driving those grand cycles of creation and destruction throughout the entire universe.
Cycles of creation and destruction. So like a big bang and then a big crunch.
Not exactly, but in a way, yes. It was like a never-ending cycle, birth, death, and rebirth happening over and over.
And that's not a totally new idea, right? We see these kinds of cyclical patterns everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. Seasons changing, the life cycle of plants and animals.
Even some religions have these ideas about the end of the world and then a new beginning. It's like a universal theme.
Exactly. It's almost like Empedocles was tapping into this deep-seated human way of understanding time and change.
Makes you wonder if he was onto something, right? But let me ask you this. Did his ideas just stay in the realm of philosophy?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. They didn't. His ideas about those 4 elements had a huge impact, especially on medicine. You wouldn't believe it.
Really? How so?
So, you've got these Greek physicians, right? They took his ideas about earth, air, fire, and water, and they applied them to the human body.
The human body. You're kidding.
Nope. They came up with this theory of the 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. and each one corresponded to one of Empedocles' elements.
Wow, so they saw the human body as like a mini version of the universe?
Exactly. As above, so below.
Right. And they thought that if those humors were out of balance, you got sick.
Exactly. Say you had too much blood, which they link to air, you might be prone to anger, quick to fly off the handle.
Oh, interesting. So that's where the idea of a hot-tempered person comes from.
It could be.
Yeah.
And if you had too much black bile, which they connected to Earth, you might feel, down in the dumps.
Melancholic. So they were mapping personality traits onto physical substances in the body.
That's pretty wild. And how did they go about treating these imbalances?
Well, they had all sorts of methods to restore balance, like special diets, herbal remedies, and even purging, like,
Getting rid of stuff.
Exactly. And sometimes even bloodletting.
Bloodletting, as in draining blood.
Yep. It was pretty common back then. They thought by removing blood, you could reduce heat and inflammation in the body.
Wow, that's a pretty drastic measure.
It was, but it just goes to show you the lasting power of Empedocles' ideas. They literally shaped medical practice for centuries.
That's amazing. So we've got these 4 elements. They're shaping medicine, influencing philosophy. But were his ideas universally accepted back then?
Oh, definitely not. There were other philosophers who had very different views.
Well, you mentioned Parmenides earlier, and his idea that everything is just one unchanging reality. Exactly. Parmenides is like, nope, no change here, folks. It's all one big static thing. And then you had Heraclitus, who was all about change, but he focused on fire as the symbol of constant transformation.
Oh, right. You can't step in the same river twice, guys.
That's the one. So Empedocles was right in the middle of this bubbling cauldron of ideas, debating, challenging, pushing boundaries.
And pushing forward our understanding of the universe, it sounds like. It's amazing how these thinkers from so long ago could have such an impact. It makes you wonder, what else did Empedocles come up with?
Well, you're in for a treat because one of his most fascinating ideas was about the soul. And that's where we'll pick up after a short break. Stay tuned.
So before the break, we were talking about how Empedocles' ideas, even though they weren't always right scientifically, really shaped our understanding of the world.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like in medicine.
Right, medicine. But his influence went way beyond that, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of mind-blowing, actually. His theories about, those 4 elements and the whole love and strife thing.
Love and strife, yeah.
They had this ripple effect, spreading out into so many areas, even philosophy itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, a thinker like that, someone who's pushing the boundaries like Empedocles, he had to shake things up for the philosophers who came after him.
Really? Like, take Plato, for instance. He took those 4 elements and made them part of his own big picture of the universe, his cosmology.
Wow, so Empedocles was like laying the foundation for some of the biggest philosophical ideas in Western thought.
Exactly. And even Aristotle, he wasn't always on board with Empedocles' ideas, but he definitely took them seriously.
Yeah, he had to, right?
Oh yeah, he engaged with Empedocles' work big time. Especially his concept of those 4 primary substances, which is basically another way of thinking about the elements.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how those ideas just kept getting passed down and debated, for centuries.
It's amazing, right? A real intellectual chain reaction. And, it wasn't just philosophy. Empedocles had an impact on alchemy, too.
Alchemy? Wait, you mean like the whole turning lead into gold thing?
That's the one. The mystical symbols, the philosopher's stone, all that.
So Empedocles, accidentally kicked off the quest for gold.
Huh. In a way, yeah. Because he had these theories about the building blocks of matter, And that gave the alchemists a framework to work with.
Even if their experiments were a little more magical than scientific sometimes.
Right. But hey, you gotta start somewhere, right?
That's true. It's incredible to think about how one person's ideas can echo through history like that.
Isn't it? The power of ideas. It really shows you how much humans crave to understand the world, even if they get it wrong sometimes.
Well, speaking of getting it wrong, not everyone agreed with Empedocles. We've talked about Parmenides, the unchanging reality guy.
Right, Parmenides. And then there was Heraclitus too, remember him?
You can't step in the same river twice.
That's him. He was all about change. But for him, fire was the big symbol of transformation.
So many different perspectives back then.
Oh yeah, tons. It was like this vibrant intellectual ecosystem, everyone bouncing ideas off each other. Empedocles wasn't working in a vacuum, he was sparking debate, pushing things forward.
That's what makes studying this stuff so cool, right? It's like this ongoing conversation stretching across time.
Exactly, and all these brilliant minds wrestling with these big fundamental questions.
It makes you realize that Empedocles was more than just a guy with some wacky ideas about elements.
Totally. He was a real innovator, a big picture thinker. And it makes you wonder, what can we learn from him today? Like, why should we care about a philosopher from 2,500 years ago?
Yeah, good question. Why should we care?
Well, I think there's a lot we can take away from his work, things that still matter today.
Like what?
Well, first of all, he reminds us how important it is to keep looking for those fundamental principles that govern the universe, even if they turn out to be different than what we initially thought.
He's like, don't just accept what you see, keep digging.
Right. And it's not just about finding the answers, it's about the search itself, that drive to understand.
So he was all about questioning and exploring, basically.
Exactly. And another thing, Empedocles was really onto something with this idea of how everything is connected, like his theories about elements, they influenced medicine, philosophy, even alchemy.
It's like he was showing us that knowledge doesn't fit neatly into boxes.
Totally. What we learn in one area can totally change the way we see another, it's all connected.
That's a really powerful message. So what else? What's the third takeaway?
The third thing, I think, is just the power of human curiosity. Even if some of Empedocles' theories turned out to be wrong, he was way ahead of his time. He paved the way for all sorts of scientific and philosophical breakthroughs.
He was a pioneer, basically.
Exactly. And his example shows us that we should never stop exploring, never stop asking those big questions, Keep that sense of wonder alive.
It's inspiring to think that we're still building on the work of these ancient thinkers, adding to this ongoing conversation about the universe.
It really is. And speaking of ongoing conversations, there's one more fascinating and maybe even a little unexpected aspect of Empedocles' thought we haven't touched on yet, his ideas about the soul.
Oh yeah, you mentioned that earlier, and it sounds like a whole other deep dive.
It totally is, a journey into the more mystical and metaphysical side of Empedocles' philosophy. And that's where we're headed next.
Right, so we've been on this incredible journey with Empedocles, from his four elements to his influence on medicine and philosophy, even alchemy. But now, it sounds like we're about to enter a whole new dimension. You mentioned he had some pretty unique ideas about the soul.
Oh, he did. And get this, Empedocles didn't believe the soul was like this separate thing from the material world.
Really? So, what did he think it was made of?
He thought it was made of the same stuff as everything else, the four elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
So our souls are like little mini versions of the universe. That's a cool idea.
Yeah. It is, right. And he didn't stop there. Empedocles believed that souls weren't just stuck in human bodies, He thought they could, jump around. Transmigrate is the fancy word. Moving through different forms of life, like plants, animals, even the gods.
Whoa, hold on. So you're telling me that, according to Empedocles, a soul could be a flower in one life, then a bird in the next, and maybe even like a god after that.
You got it. That's the idea behind reincarnation, right? But here's the thing. Empedocles didn't see it as random. He believes there was a kind of moral law guiding this whole soul journey. He called it the cycle of necessity.
So basically what you did in your past life determined what you came back as, kind of like karma.
Exactly. If you lived what he considered an impure life, your soul would be punished. You might come back as like a plant or an animal, but if you were virtuous, your soul could ascend, maybe even reach a state of pure bliss with the gods.
It's like this cosmic ladder, with souls climbing their way up to enlightenment over many lifetimes.
Yeah, that's a good way to picture it. And Empedocles thought this cycle went on for thousands of years until the soul was finally purified and free from this whole reincarnation thing.
It's mind-blowing to think that these ancient philosophers are wrestling with such huge questions about life and death and, what it all means. Even if their answers don't quite line up with our modern scientific views, it's still amazing, right?
Oh, totally. Empedocles, with his blend of philosophy, mythology, and all these mystical ideas, he reminds us to keep asking those big questions. And to stay curious, there's always more to discover.
It's been an awesome deep dive from those four elements to love and strife to reincarnation. Empedocles has definitely given us a lot to think about.
He really has. And as we wrap up, it just makes me appreciate the power of ideas, How humans have always tried to make sense of the universe and our place in it. It's pretty remarkable.
Totally. And Empedocles, he encourages us to look beyond the obvious, to see those connections between things, and to embrace the mysteries of the universe with open minds.
Well said. And maybe as we navigate our own complicated world, we can find some inspiration in his vision, a universe that's always changing, driven by these opposing forces, but ultimately striving for balance and harmony.
That's a powerful thought to leave us with. And to all our listeners out there, Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking your own understanding of the world. Until next time, happy exploring.